Hello, everybody. Hope you guys are all having a fantastic week or weekend, night, whatever have you. I think what is probably going to be kind of a short one today, but still wanted to talk about it because I think it's a pretty fun fight with Batman versus Taskmaster. And now, my opinion, these guys do represent like two ends of the spectrum, where Batman is like a very, very, very talked about character when it comes to like versus battles and such, and Taskmaster I think is obviously comparatively underrepresented. I feel like Taskmaster is a very fun character to talk about with these, even though generally with Taskmaster it can be kind of hard to come up with matchups because for him it really is just a like simple flowchart of does his opponent have superpowers? If so, he loses. If not, he wins. Now, that's not like 100% always going to be the case, right? In fact, I do think that the Batman versus Taskmaster has like a little more nuance to it. But in general, that's kind of how I feel about him, which is probably why we don't see him utilized too often when it comes to talking about this. Also, just maybe not as popular of a character, right? But that being said, going to go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about a few different categories and then the verdict. So, to start it off, the strength. Batman has a lot of feats from his many, many years of being a crime fighter. Now, people do like to point out the good old, made Dark Side bleed with a kick, and those like type of feats. But I do think that if we're being reasonable with Batman, he's a very impressively strong human, but he does peak out at peak human, obviously, right? I think that nobody in good faith is really going to contest that. He's pretty much as strong as a person can get. That's kind of all I'm going to say about it because frankly, I don't think the strength is going to be a huge deciding factor in this fight, but worth at least discussing in passing. As for Taskmaster, I'd say that he's probably like around a similar level of being like pretty much as strong as human characters get. He's capable of knocking back characters like Spider-Man and knocking out characters like Spider-Man. He's thrown Iron Man before, which I think it probably varies a little bit from armor to armor, but Iron Man is certainly not a light character, right? When he's wearing his suit of armor, so pretty strong, pretty peak human strength. Again, I don't think strength is like a huge factor, but if I were to give it to somebody, I'd probably give a slight edge to Batman just because it feels like he's had more feats that have shown him, just being stronger in general. Even though I'm not counting like the most high end outlandish feats, but generally I think it's fair to say Batman is probably like a little physically stronger. Um, and you also, I don't even know if Taskmaster really trains his strength as much as Batman does. Like that guy is out like leg pressing buses, in his free time. Again, within reason, but like Taskmaster comparatively is like more of a, I guess, a refined fighter. Maybe somebody will find a panel of Taskmaster like benching 1,000 pounds and prove me wrong, but can't even send those in YouTube anyway. So as for speed, I do think that again, this can be you could go one of two ways with this, right? Like one, we could take the absolute high end feats, or basically just say they're both human. They both are pretty much as fast as characters get. For feats, though, Batman regularly fights characters like Deathstroke. Deathstroke being a character who's capable of like reacting to the Flash, um, or at least like reacting to and surprising the Flash and like kind of anticipating where he's going to be, which is not quite reacting to the Flash, right? But it is still like an impressive feat nonetheless. And even if we're not going to highball Batman to be like that, like strict level, he does often fight characters with guns. He has been shown able to, whether through like aim dodging or like purely moving, he is able to like dodge gunfire. I would say probably aim dodging. I think it's maybe a little strange to say Batman is like quite the speed of like a bullet being fired out of a gun, but there's people who would say it, right? So generally Batman is like a pretty fast character, pretty much as good as like a human can get, maybe even like a little more, right? He's very capable of like fighting against armed opponents and like reacting to it, but a lot of that is just also like his expertise in fighting and like his knowledge when it comes to how to disarm opponents, and not necessarily him stat checking a random crook with a gun, right? Or rather, like stat checking the gun, I suppose is what I mean to say. As for Taskmaster, I do think that like Taskmaster is like a little like weirder when it comes to it. Obviously, like through like the successive scaling, we can get Batman to be like maybe that reacting to the Flash level, but again, that's like a prediction thing. Whereas Taskmaster, I feel like just by the nature of like street tier characters in Marvel, is probably just like has like that slight advantage where like he fights very regularly against characters like Spider-Man and Iron Fist, who I would say are like pretty confidently like maybe not Iron Fist, but Spider-Man at least is like very comfortably above the likes of Batman when it comes to speed and agility. Even though Spider-Man's like still maybe like considered street tier, he is like maybe like the pinnacle of what street tier can be, right? And Taskmaster is able to react to him, fight against him, and even like kind of beat him sometimes in fights, right? Spider-Man, of course, probably needs no introduction in terms of like his speed and agility. Very regularly able to fight against characters who use sound and electricity-based attacks. Although might be a little hard to pinpoint if that's Spider-Man exactly reacting to lightning or if it's him using his spider sense to kind of, in a sense, aim dodge as well. But generally, I would comfortably give the edge in this to Taskmaster, but it's not by a crazy margin, right? I just do think that like he does generally show more impressive feats against characters that are faster than them. Not to say Batman doesn't, right? Like even like reacting to and dodging the Omega beams attacks of Superman when he's like enraged or whatever or whatnot is like pretty impressive in and of itself. But I do feel like those feel like more of outliers for Batman, whereas Taskmaster's feels like it's more consistent. But I would hear arguments to disagree with that. I don't think that if there is an edge here, it's significant. Intelligence and strategy. I don't think this category is going to require too much talking, but basically, Batman is an incredibly smart person with prep time. He's pretty much unbeatable, capable of devising plans to beat the whole Justice League. Although, to be fair, he did have like very intricate knowledge of their powers and how they work, but even still, like pretty impressive stuff. Able to outsmart characters like Darkseid, who are, you know, pretty beyond human levels of intelligence, and widely considered to be the like second smartest, if not the smartest, maybe third smartest. Some like rotation of smartness with Mr. Terrific and Lex Luthor for the DC top spot, at least among humans. So needs no introduction. Is like a pretty smart guy. Generally very well rounded. Like has a lot of knowledge of a lot of different disciplines. Most of which he does like exclusively train in stuff that he finds is like relevant for his job as like a crime fighter. But that does include like a wide umbrella of things. Taskmaster, on the other hand, is very one trick when it comes to his knowledge. He's like a very, very knowledgeable fighter. He like Batman obviously has his whole like knows every martial art ever studied, whatever it is. Every comic book character has that at this point. But like Taskmaster does kind of take it to like the next degree, where he's like very capable of on the fly analyzing people's fighting styles and like responding to it like in a snap, photographic, photoreflexic memory. All of that good stuff. I do think that that's like his one category. When he really excels is like combat prowess and knowledge, whereas Batman's more well-rounded. But I would also say, like, just to make sure it's clear, Taskmaster I would say is more knowledgeable than Batman in terms of martial arts and fighting. I think that to argue otherwise is maybe a little disingenuous. Like Batman is a very I don't want to. There's like the phrase "jack of all trades, master of none." I don't want to say Batman's not a master of like a lot of. He's pretty much as good as like humans can get at a lot of things, right? But I will say you're taking a character who's like spent a lot of his time studying a lot of different things versus a character who's literally only ever cared about like being the best martial artist and fighter, right? So I do think that I would probably give that edge to Taskmaster, but obviously overall intelligence does go to Batman. Strategic planning, all of that good stuff is going to Batman. Taskmaster does just have combat knowledge. And speaking of combat skill, I don't think I really need to, harp on this too much. Batman is a pretty good fighter, knows all the different martial arts, blah blah blah, capable of fighting against characters like Lady Shiva. Although Lady Shiva, in terms of pure combat ability, does best Batman pretty regularly. Batman's not really winning that fight unless he uses some sort of like underhanded tactics. I don't want to say underhanded, but like non-martial arts tactics, right? Taskmaster, on the other hand, is like I would go so far as to say the best hand-to-hand combatant in the Marvel universe. Obviously, he does lose pretty like regularly to Deadpool. Doesn't necessarily mean Deadpool is more talented of a fighter, although he is in his own right a very talented fighter. If I were to be honest, I feel like it's lazy writing on the part of Marvel writers. Maybe it's on track for like how Deadpool is written in general, but the whole "you can't predict me because I'm too unpredictable" is just I think it's a little silly. But same difference. Taskmaster is like a very very like strong analytical mind. The one thing that I think I should probably mention here is that there is like a panel somewhere where Captain America is fighting against Taskmaster, says something to the effect of Taskmaster is like very by the book and it makes him very predictable. So if I feint this attack, Taskmaster will like think I'm gonna be going for it, and I can use that and exploit that to my advantage. I think that that's kind of like an Outlander thing, or Outlander, Outlier. Sorry, but it just doesn't seem very consistent with what we've seen. I feel like Taskmaster is not that much of like a one trick pony, like mindless. Like he's definitely not like mindlessly fighting, right? Like when he's fighting, he is thinking of every possibility of what somebody can do and like matching it. So maybe you could make some argument that Batman's gonna realize that he's reacting to his attacks and then like adapt, make him hit him with a feint and then hit him. But I feel like Taskmaster is like there's no way Taskmaster is like not able to deal with that. Or, maybe he's not. Whatever. I just feel like whenever Taskmaster loses hand to hand, it's always just like the writer inserting X like machina reasons for why a character is able to outsmart him or best him, whatever it is. I feel like Taskmaster gets a bad rep, but maybe that's just a part of his character and you can't like separate that from him. But say what you will, I do think combat skill is very handedly going to Taskmaster, right? Now, in terms of equipment, again, another category it's kind of a blowout. Taskmaster just doesn't have the same level of equipment that Batman has. I don't want to go through the whole list because, so much. But Batman has, most relevantly, like tasers, batarangs, grappling hooks, smoke pellets, stun grenades, other types of grenades, high caliber explosives. The list goes on. And that's just like the stuff that's on his utility belt, right? Point is, he's got a lot of versatility, a lot of things he can do. And Taskmaster, in comparison, has really three things that you normally see him depicted with: a sword, a shield, and a bow and arrow. Often, right? Bow and arrow actually maybe not too much. I can think of this like the his appearance, and then I think like even the cover photo I'm using for this video, he has a bow and arrow, but I don't really see him use it. I wouldn't really. It's really just the shield and the sword. I don't think that there's anything particularly noteworthy about the shield and the sword. I feel like the shield, it's like smaller than Captain America's shield. It's like kind of a reasonable shield size. And he's got a sword. That's really all I've got to it, right? Batman's easily taking this category. Although I will say, for the average person, a sword and a shield is probably doing more than Batman's utility stuff, but Batman just has so much more utility stuff, right? So that being said, to the verdict, I do think that this does depend a little bit. Actually, it doesn't depend too much. Maybe it depends on like the situation that they're fighting in, but I will say that I do give the fight like 9 times out of 10 to Batman. And the reason for that is simple. Batman, as soon as he realizes that he is not winning like a fist fight with Taskmaster, and heaven knows he is not winning a fist fight with Taskmaster, just drops like a smoke pellet on the ground, and then he's like fighting in his element, right? Batman is a very skilled fighter, but first and foremost, he is a lurker in the shadows. He's very good at using, stealth and like similar tactics to take opponents down. He does not need to fight Taskmaster on Taskmaster's terms. If he did, he would get rocked. But if Batman is using even like any of his equipment or any of his like tactics in a fight with Taskmaster, which unless they're like stripped naked fighting on the moon or something, he would be, right? So I do think that I do give the category pretty comfortably towards Batman, despite the fact that I'm a pretty big Taskmaster stan when it comes to fights, and I do stand by the fact that he doesn't really lose 1v1s against like any street tier character. Batman being a very notable exception where he's not just a street tier character, right? He's a character that does not rely on his martial prowess to win fights, right? So that's my consensus on it. Kind of a short video with this one, but I just wanted to get one out of the way, and this is a fun topic to talk about. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, or feel free to join the Discord. Always happy to talk with people about how they feel about matchups and such there. So, I hope you guys have a great night, a great rest of your week as well, and I will catch you guys all in the next one.